Welcome to the second Old World, Old School White Dwarf style battle report. The first was on the main 6++ channel. I will link that in the description if you want to find it. But going forward, this will be the new home of all of the Old World content for 6++. I'm aiming to get one of these out every fortnight at minimum. They will typically be interspersed with the Close Order podcast. We'll be having one of those come out every Wednesday around 5 o'clock GMT. And then on off weeks, we'll be getting a battle report coming out at the same time, 5 p.m. GMT on the alternate weeks. There is going to be one coming next week along with another Close Order podcast, but after that, they will be interspersed. So this game was a lot of fun. I played a lovely chap called Mark. Mark and I have been talking for a little while about a theory he had for Chaos Warriors, where you go for a Tzeentch bunker and you put as much of your points into casters as possible, and you just pepper your opponent to the point where it doesn't really matter that you've got a vulnerable unit. You've kind of tabled them before they can get close. That was the general idea there. You wanted to put into practice. He was playing, Tzeentch casters, some small MSU units as well. I was playing a fairly typical Ogre Kingdoms list. I'd been experimenting with a few different bits and pieces. In previous games, I think I'd put too many points into my characters. I'd run a Tyrant and a Bruiser on Stonehorn. That turned out to be quite ineffective. So I wanted to go with something a little more restrained, a little more standard. This was a lot of fun. One of the things that Mark and I did was we tried to be as correct with our movement as possible. So specifically charges, you'll see moving like through the course of the game that there are charges where it looks very odd because we've charged in a straight line, we've clipped because the straight line is the shortest distance to make that charge. Then we've clipped the unit and then we've wheeled. It's something that we were both very cognizant of going in, and we both moved to try and take advantage of it. So I used, for example, some Gorges to try and bait out some charges that were quite inefficient to position my opponent in a certain way. My list started with a Slaughtermaster, a level 4 caster. I went with Illusion. I also had a Lore Familiar, so I picked the Trollgut spell to give a unit regen. If you cast it on an 11+, they get a 5-up regen, quite a strong ability to have. I went for Column of Crystal, a nice move blocking spell to try and shape the board if I needed to. Miasmic Mirage, which is a -2 to move on the unit that you've hexed, and also they can't march or charge. Nice control piece there. And also Spectral Doppelganger, which gives you 2d6 auto hits with whichever weapon you're equipped with. I wanted to go for something that's, fairly punchy, given that he was, probably going to end up in combat. I am playing Ogres after all. I'd given the Slaughtermaster the Butcher's Cauldron on take a leadership test. If you pass it, your squad gets a 5-up regen for the turn. Can't do it if you're in combat. I'd also gone for a Spangle Shard to give him a regen. Again, planning on ending up in combat with the Slaughtermaster, and Biting Blade and Giant Breaker. So Giant Breaker buffing my strength, and Biting Blade give me a lot of AP, meaning those auto hits if I ended up in combat with Spectral Doppelganger, doing quite a lot for me. That was my general. I also had a Bruiser, who was the battle standard bearer. Didn't go for an upgraded BSB. I just wanted something to make sure that my army was a little more reliable when I was making those tests. I'd given him a great weapon and a Stonehorn. Fairly bare bones. Just wanted to, rock through with something fairly tough and see how much damage I could get with that. It was a little bit of a distraction Carnifex. I also had in my core, I had 3 Bulls with Iron Fists. Cheap, you got to have a unit. This is just, I think, the most efficient way to use a small unit there. It's not a lot of points to upgrade them to have a better save and an extra attack, so worth going for that one in my opinion. 2 units of 4 Iron Guts. One of these stands on its own. That's the unit with the Cannibal Totem. And the other unit doesn't have an upgraded magic banner, but they did have a Lookout Nobbler. That was joined by the Slaughtermaster. In theory, both of those getting a 5-up Feel No Pain at all times just makes them a lot harder to chew through. The Gutlords there also have the Demon Slayer Scars to give them terror. This is really nice if you're charging into chaff, trying to make it run away, or making it more difficult for your opponent to send their heavy hitters. Just the occasional threat of failing a terror test makes it a lot harder to play around a list like this, and it also means that you don't have to deal with terror tests on your unit as well, I believe. There was a unit of 4 Mournfang Cavalry. This is sort of the big heavy hitter of the list. In there, again, Crusher with Demon Slayer's Scars, which is a very common magic item, which is why you can have it multiple times. A Standard Bearer with a Bull Standard. This is great because it lets you re-roll your impact hits. Mournfang Cavalry have a bucket load of impact hits. So this is, I think, the best place for that one to go. Really just crushing the front rank of most things that you charge into, and then swinging with your great weapons and, yeah, heavy armor, giving you a 4 up there with the armored hide of the Mournfangs themselves. Finally, I had a couple of Gorges in just for Vanguard move blocking, trying to play the board a little bit more, make sure that I'm not just in a game where my opponent can run rings around me, which is what I've found with Ogres to up to this point, but I have played against some faster armies. And oh yes, finally an Iron Blaster. Iron Blasters, I have a bit of a history with. First time I played them, I had 2 in a list, and they both misfired on turn 1 and couldn't shoot until turn 3. I'm sure that won't happen this game, though. I'm sure I'll be totally fine. There's no chance of that happening again. Onto Mark's list. So Mark was playing with the concept that if you're using the marker Tzeentch, what that gives you is if a caster has the marker Tzeentch and the unit that it's joined has the marker Tzeentch and a unit strength of 10 or greater when the character's inside, you have a +1 to your casting modifier. He's then combining that with the Skull of Catan, which is a 3-inch aura of +1 to cast for all casters, enemy and allied, but realistically 3 inches. It's going to be very rare that your opposing casters are casting meaningfully if they're within 3 inches of your Sorcerer Lord. So that seems like a fairly good upgrade to have. What that means is your level 4 casters are casting at +6. Your level 2 casters are effectively level 4s. They're casting at +4. And it makes it much harder for your opponent to deal with the vast barrage of magic missiles you're sending that way. So 2 Sorcerer Lords, the first of which was Demonology, Marker Tzeentch, Skull of Catan, Diabolic Splendor. So the reason he'd gone Demonology on this one, where he had points, he was picking up the Marker Tzeentch and going Battle Magic so he could roll for Fireball, get a second magic missile. In this case, he wanted to have a high-level caster that could also cast all the buffing spells. So I believe it's Demonic Vessel and Demonic Vigor are the 2 ones there to boost up the stats of the brick of Chaos Warriors that the unit was going to be in. Diabolic Splendor is a -1 to hit for the unit that the sorcerer is attached to in the shooting phase, just to try and keep that unit safer in a shooting matchup as well. Didn't come up much in this game, but it's just nice to have in general if you're coming up against a shooting list. And the Sorcerer Lord sits in the Chaos Warriors. I believe it's not at the far outside, but 1 in, and that lets you reach the other side of the unit so you can have 3 casters in very comfortably. And also you can reach the outside of the unit to have like a mounted Exalted Sorcerer in range of the +3, the 3-inch +1 to cast as well. So first Sorcerer Lord in the unit, second Sorcerer Lord going for Battle Magic, fishing for that Fireball, swapping out a spell for Blue Fire. The reason that this sort of whole list works is the Marker Tzeentch gives you access to the Tzeentch spell Blue Fire. It's only 18-inch range, but it's D6 +3 auto hits, strength 4, AP 2, which is just, I think, the best magic missile in the game. I don't think there's really anything that compares. D6 +3 is more consistent than 2D6. Strength 4 is fine. It's not bad. It's pretty good. There's a lot of toughness 3 and 4 in the game. AP 2 is incredible. There's very few things that compare with that, with the sort of quantity of shots you can put out with the Marker Tzeentch. I don't think it's as good as the Beastman caster, who is using Vile Tide, rerolling all the wounds. Sure, you're fishing for 6s, but it ignores all armor. It's not on that level, but I can take, well, Mark took 5 casters, which is, I think, more effective than just 1 souped up caster. So 2 Sorcerer Lords, then there's an Exalted Sorcerer, level 2 Battle Magic and Marker Tzeentch, just fishing for that additional magic missile. Then another Exalted Sorcerer, Demonology on this one. Mark said he would have gone for the Battle Magic and Marker Tzeentch if you had the points, but I believe you had to shave some points here. And then there was an Exalted Sorcerer, again, Demonology, Ruby Ring of Ruin, and Chaos Steed. In this case, it was deliberate that Mark went for Demonology. He wasn't sure if you could cast Fireball and also cast Fireball from the Ruby Ring and Ruin. I think you can, especially with the FAQ that's come out since we played this game. The It's clarified that it's not the caster who's casting the spell, it's the bear, sorry, the bound item is casting it. So I think you could cast a fireball and then also have fireball cast from the Ruby Ring and Rune. But if you do know, especially if you've got any page numbers you could cite, please do let me know in the comments. I'd like clarification on that one because it's something that's come up where I've made decisions about casters that I'm not sure if I want to, go with battle magic or go for something else. So that's half the list. That's 1,000 points. And then there's a Chaos Warrior brick here that they are bunkered in. 15 models, arrayed in a 6x3. There's 3 casters in there. So that gives you 18 models strong. Mark Tzeentch, just there to buff up the casting. 2 units of 7 Forsaken by Slaanesh. These are incredible. That gives them a Swift Stride. The Forsaken by Slaanesh, they're so fast, they're so punchy. They are a little random in terms of you get either extra AP, killing blow, or poisoned attacks when you are in combat. You don't get to choose, you've got to roll. But the quantity of attacks for the price and the speed on the model, I think they're incredible. We're going to be seeing a lot of Forsaken, especially Slaanesh for the Forsaken. Maybe Khorne as well, just to make them punchier, but I think Slaanesh is more valuable. Then we've got 2 units of the 6 Marauder Horsemen. We're not seeing as many of these. I think I really, really like them. They're very cheap. They're very punchy. Mark had gone for Flails, Light Armor, and Mark of Khorne, giving them Frenzy, getting those extra attacks, just really charging in, slamming something for cheap. The conceit of this list is that it's a shooting list that wants to buy as much time as possible. So if you've got, quite cheap throwaway missile units that you can just punch your opposing players' threatening units as they come towards you, that's good. You do have to be a little careful with your positioning. Obviously, the Frenzy unit has to charge. If it charges, you might leave yourself without the ability to shoot things with your magic missiles, but Mark didn't have any issues with that in our game. Following up, there's 3 units of 5 Chaos Warhounds. 2 of them had Vanguard, again, points. He just didn't have enough points to make the third have Vanguard as well. Great, cheap, chaff. They can screen, they can move block, control the board, all the stuff that you'd expect from a cheap, fast unit like that. And then finally, 6 Chosen Knights. This is the hammer. Mark thought it was important to have something that could deal with an actual threat in melee, because as nice as the magic damage is, that it is nice, it's not going to get you all the way there. So he went for a champion, a standard with the blasted standard, which is to reroll ones for your armor saves in the shooting phase only, I believe. But if you're being peppered by arrows, it means that instead of every 6 saves you lose a model, and they are expensive models. It's every 1 in 36. So especially low AP shooting, it makes them significantly more tanky. He's gone for Lancers, Shields, and Full Plate, giving him that 2-up save on the Bard's Warhorse, and then Marcus Slaanesh as well. Marcus Slaanesh is really nice. It gives you additional initiative on the first round of combat. So as long as you're not getting flank charged or rear charged, if you're able to counter charge, it's very difficult for anyone to hit you before you hit them. And I think that's the real value of the unit. In this game, Mark held them back quite a lot and then used them as a counterpunch unit. That's the aim of them, which is why you wouldn't see the Mark of Khorne on there, despite it does increase their output, but I think it makes them too uncontrollable. Deployment. I had quite a few less units, so I ended up getting the +1 to my roll. The way I deployed was I put the Iron Guts sort of centrally, one over to the right, leaving myself room here to attach a Slaughtermaster if needed, but also giving myself the option to come in on this side as well. Obviously, the one on the outside has the Cannibal standard, so they've got the Feel No Pain already. Just trying to give like an aggressive, tough flank. So even if Mark did put his casters down here, I was able to, not take too much punishment going forwards. I hid the Bulls because they were the squishiest unit, and then I put the Mournfangs out to the side. I waited until I'd seen where Mark put his casters before I did that. If he'd put them over here, like if he'd put the Tzeentch bunker over here, the warrior brick, I was probably going to put them more aggressively over to the side just to try and make it so that they weren't shot to pieces turn 1, because they are only T4. They look like they should be a lot more, but they are still not squishy, but they're not the toughest things in the world, especially when there's lots of AP2 coming at them. Fortunately, I was able to wait until Mark had committed his Chosen Knights before I deployed my characters, which was good. So I waited for him to put them down. He thought I was going to put my Bruiser up here, which is why he put his Chosen Knights off to the flank, partially to respond to the Mournfangs, but he thought I was going to try and overload the right side of the board there. But after seeing where the Chosen Knights went, I put the Bruiser over here, which meant it was a little harder for Mark to get the Chosen Knights to bear. Mark put the 2 units of Warhounds on the left and one on the right. I believe the two of them had Vanguard were out on the sides there, and the one that didn't in the center. A couple of units of the Marauder Horsemen there in the center as well, with the flails. Forsaken just in the center, and the Chosen Knights in behind them, as said. Of course, there's the bunker down there. Vanguard moves. Oh yes, no, Vanguard were over on the left. So the 2 units that were in the difficult terrain moved forwards, so wasn't too bothered about losing the movement there because he was only doing it in his Vanguard moves. Moved those out aggressively towards the center, looking to move block me. I moved a Gorger in each flank. Once I'd seen where the Marauder Horsemen were, my plan was to try and frenzy bait them and try and get the best use out of them. At this point, I knew that I was going first. I'd won the roll off having the +1 as well. Coming into my strategy phase, this went well for me. This is, I think, the best the strategy phase went all game. I passed the leadership test on the Cauldron to give this unit here a 5-up Feel No Pain, and regen, I should say, 5-up regen. And the Mournfangs, I cast Troll Guts there, giving them a 5-up regen as well. Cast it on the 11+. So moving into the movement, I knew that I had to close the gap. So basically, what happened here was, this is what I spoke about in the intro, where I was talking about how we were trying to do movement very particularly. So I moved the Gorger up, and I measured out where the Marauders would be. So the Marauders have to come up here and then wheel, and that meant that if they killed the Gorger and overran, they would go up this way, but they wouldn't connect with the Mournfangs. I made sure to go out to the right. It did mean that I was in the dangerous terrain, the difficult terrain, sorry, dangerous for them. But I wasn't too bothered about that because I wanted to make sure that I had the initiative in terms of where I was going on my next turn charge, and it's not as far there because I was expecting the Marauder Horsemen to overrun as well. Iron Fist Bulls moved into the center here. We were playing the mission where you get additional victory points if you hold the objective at the end. I thought, oh, great, I'll just put my cheap unit in there to get them protection. I believe the protection it gives them is something like -2 to hit in the shooting phase. The reason I can't remember is it didn't matter because it turns out magic missiles don't need to roll to cast. So I moved them into here. Really, I should have left them behind for a couple of turns because I had not realized how this was not going to provide them any protection at all. The Gorges moved out the flank again, just trying to, angled particularly, making sure that the Marauders were going to be in specific angles. So what ended up happening was they charged forwards and they had to come in like that from the way I positioned here. Everything else just moved up. Most things marched. The Iron Blasters didn't march. The Slaughtermaster didn't march as well. Just wanted to make sure that I could cast some spells with it. But otherwise, I just full sent it forwards, basically. Didn't want to take too many turns of being shot. Into the shooting phase, and the Iron Blaster misfires. I've got a history with these things. I played 2 of them in my first game with Ogres in the Old World, and they both misfired on turn 1, and they both weren't able to shoot until turn 3. So it could have gone worse. They could have exploded. But yeah, I think I just need to take them out of my lists, unfortunately. They're too expensive to not do the thing that you want them to do. So Iron Blaster, I don't think fired its cannon at all this game. Spoiler, it was just a heavy chariot, but it's still pretty good at being. Other than that, there wasn't really any shooting to report. I tried to cast Column of Crystal. I rolled it on a 15. The Sorcerer Lord failed to dispel it, so I did plonk that in the center here. I don't believe I've got it marked. Reason being, it doesn't last for very long. So coming into the strategy phase, they immediately dispel the Column of Crystal. So it's not on the board there. Apologies if you see me looking over to the left. Mark has 5 casters, which means I have to do a whole lot of note taking to make sure that I get this right. So coming into the first strategy phase for the Warriors of Chaos. Started off with the first Sorcerer Lord casting Demonic Vigor. Only rolled a 10, rolled a 1 and a 3, but then the Sorcerer Lord did dispel it on a 13. Great start. Really happy with this. I was expecting to be blown out with the magic phase. So dispelling the first thing that Mark cast was big fan of that. Mark then cast his Demonic Vessel on a 13. He rolled a 7 there. And the Slaughter Master rolled a 9, despite, Normally a 9 would be enough to dispel when your opponent's only running a 7. You're both level 4 casters. Never mind. Mark's got +6 to his cast. I've only got +4 to my dispel. So that one did go off, which gives them the demonic vessel, I think, was additional toughness or something along those lines. I didn't end up targeting the Tzeentch bunker on my turn, so it didn't end up mastering, but it's still a nice defensive buff to get on. That was about it for the strategy phase. We went into the movement phase, and both Marauder Horsemen, frenzied, did have to declare charges into the gorges. And here we see, this is what I was talking about, where I went with the it's the slightly off angle, but you can see that they will just miss the Mournfangs if they do overrun. So both gorges charge, both squads of Marauder Horsemen charge into the gorges there. And then what Mark does is some quite interesting maneuvering. So the Warhounds on the right come up here, and this is to try and mess around with the Mournfangs, basically. So he's thinking that they're gonna, his plan is to charge them. No, he's thinking that I'm going to charge them in here, or potentially charge them in the flank if they overrun, which is more likely. So he's brought some Warhounds up just to try and support if the horsemen do survive. Gives them some options. Otherwise, just try and tie them up for a turn. The Forsaken angle to deal with the Mournfangs if they do charge into the horsemen here just gives him quite nice angles to charge into. Basically, no matter where my Mournfangs end up, he's going to be able to see them. The Chaos Chosen Knights do just move up over to the left there. Now that he realizes that I have committed more to the left, he wants to have them supporting on the left, so that's where the first movement goes. The Tzeentch bunker decides to get the hell out of there because he can see all my big meat is coming up to the side, so he shuffles across a couple of inches, and then this sorcerer that was close to them just moves back as well. Warhounds on the left here, they move up and pivot so that the Iron Guts, if they charge, they have to go into the flank. The idea here is he's trying to get me to charge into the flank and then potentially, overrun out of position, or at least just slow me down because it's a very short charge. It's quite an effective move block. The second unit Warhounds don't really want to do anything, so he just wheels them, tries to get them into a better position for next turn. I thought this was a misplay at the time. I think he would have been better off served just putting them behind the Marauder Horsemen at an angle. That way, when the Bruiser inevitably charges into them and crushes them, it overruns into the Warhounds, which would buy a little bit of time for me, I think. Otherwise, just a lot of shuffling here, really setting up for the shooting phase, which is what comes in next. And my God, what a shooting phase. So let me give you the play-by-play. Start off with the first Sorcerer Lord. Sorcerer Lord casts Blue Fire on a 9, but it's dispelled on a 15. Perfect. Lovely stuff. Tries to cast one of the Vortex spells it has on a 12, dispelled on a 13. Great stuff. I'm feeling fantastic. This is going so well. Casters, Tzeentch? Never heard of you. I'm an angry fat man with an apron and a cauldron with hooks in my back. Obviously, you've got no chance against me. This was where it stopped going well for me. So I got all my dispels out of the way at the start of the phase. Then the Sorcerer Lord 2, Blue Fire on a 13. I didn't dispel that. So that was 7 hits into the bulls in the center here, which becomes 5 wounds at AP -2. And yeah, they just go through. That just kills one, does 2 wounds to another. This is terrifying. Fireball cast on a 13, fails to spell at 10, another 7 hits, which is average, so I don't know why I stressed that, but I felt bad about it at the time. So he rolls hard again, he gets 5 wounds. This time the bulls do manage to, chunk through a bit of it, and their armor saves them, so they only take 2 wounds from that. But that leaves me with just 2 wounds in the squad, which is not particularly comfortable. After that, he casts the Pillar of Flame on an 11. I match with an 11 again. Skullikatam and the Mark of Tzeentch coming in hot. If he didn't have those, I would have been dispelling pretty much everything he put out there. But yeah, manages to get the Pillar of Flame down, chucks that in front of the Iron Guts. That's the 2 Sorcerer Lords done. That's a lot. That's 7 wounds to the bulls. There's a Pillar of Flame out on the board. There's some offensive buffs that have been cast earlier in the turn as well. Then he moves on to the Exalted Sorcerer, the third one, the mounted unit. The only meaningful target that it has is the bulls in the central tower. Tries to cast the Ruby Ring on a 9. I do get rid of this. Casting on a +2 as opposed to dispelling on a -4. I feel pretty comfortable with that. And then he fails to cast Demonic Familiars. He rolls a 3 on the dice, a 1 and a 2. Fortunately, didn't miscast, but that was nice after the barrage that I'd been taking. Moves on to the Exalted Sorcerer number 1. That's the one in the Tzeentch bunker on the left-hand flank there. So rolls a 12, and I failed to dispel on a 10. That's gets 6 hits, 2 wounds, and just a single wound into the balls there, which drops it to just 1 wound remaining. Really holding on for a last gasp, but probably should have just left them behind the wall. Although it did absorb a lot of damage. I'd rather it would go into the balls than the Iron Guts, that's for sure. They've got the same save, so they'd have died fairly similarly. They just have a 5-up ward, 5-up regen instead. So after that, the Exalted Sorcerer 2 does manage to cast the Vortex of Chaos, chucks that next to the Pillar of Flame as well. Obviously, with them being random movement, just having more stuff in front of me is quite nice. And I failed to dispel it. I was out of range, so the reason that the Exalted Sorceress moved backwards a little bit is it had moved out of dispel range. So I went for my Fated Dispel. It was the last spell of the turn basically, and didn't manage to get that one stopped. Combat. So on the left flank, the Marauder Horsemen absolutely chunk through that Gorger, kill it with ease. On the right flank, because there's only 2 models in base to base, the Gorger only takes 2 wounds, which was less than I thought it would. I thought it was going to absolutely fall over. So in return, it swings back and I believe bites the head off one with its biting, killing blow attack. However, the horsemen on the left flank do have to overrun being frenzied, and they go through 2 vortexes. They got off pretty lucky. He only lost 2 models there, but yeah, the wheel did cause some definite concern when he was rolling the dice there. The start of my turn too. So before I got to do anything else, Mark got to move his vortices, multiple vortexes. Anyway, I can't remember which one it was. I think it might have been the Vortex of Chaos. One of the 2, as he moved it, he managed to clip the terrain that the bull was in. And I believe we played this right, but if a vortex hits the terrain that a model is inside, it counts as being hit. So that finished off the last wound on the bull. Again, if someone can clarify that one, if anyone knows the exact page rule, we did have a look at it, but I think by that point we were just sort of like, you know what, this seems right. You've hit the terrain that it's in. It's probably taken the damage, and there was only 1 left on it. Other than that, there was it was again pretty okay turn. I managed to get the 5-up regen off from the passing the leadership on the cauldron there for the Slaughtermaster and casting it into the Mournfang. It was important here because I wanted to get the Mournfang into the action this turn. Iron Blaster again, still unable to shoot this turn after misfiring in turn 1, but I was going to move it up and use it sort of as an aggressive melee chariot. Here we can see charges. So the Mournfangs charged in here. The Iron Guts charged in as well. I wanted to try and get some movement because I've kind of move blocked myself a little bit, especially with the width of the unit and the terrain and the models next to them. So you can see there's a awkward charge off to the side here because there wasn't quite enough room for the unit to swing in. This was something that we spend quite a lot of time sort of working out how the correct way to do it is, and I think we were quite happy with how we got it there. On the left flank, the Iron Guts charged into the Warhounds. They did pass the terror test, which I was quite surprised at. Obviously, the Marauder Horsemen here didn't have to take one, still being frenzied, having won their last combat. And over here on the right, same story. They didn't have to take any terror tests, so the leadership not being an issue there. Other than that, there wasn't much to do. The Iron Blaster marched forwards and pivoted as well, just threatening, a charge into something meaningful on the flank here. And yeah, combat happened. Funnily enough, all of the squishy things that my ogres were in combat with just fell over. The Mournfangs absolutely melted the Marauder Horsemen. I didn't even roll any attacks. I just made my impact hits and went, oh, yeah, all of those are dead then, I guess. They tested to restrain here on the flank because the way the Forsaken were, I didn't want to get flank charged. as nice as it would have been to get into the Warhounds and mulch them with the impact hits, what I didn't want was to overrun and then the Forsaken charge me in the side. So I decided to test a restraint with both of them, meaning that the Forsaken couldn't actually charge me into the flank there. Because they weren't able to charge me in the flank, they weren't able to charge at all, which is something that has been clarified in the most recent FAQ. Into the Mournfang that is on the next turn. The Bruiser, again, absolutely demolished the unit that was in, surprisingly, and then overran into the Warhounds here. The Iron Guts did fail their test to restrain, which was very upsetting because they then overran in a direction that was completely useless to me. So shout out to Mike's Chaos Warhounds doing exactly the job that he planned for them. Moving into the second Warriors of Chaos turn, the Vortex of Chaos clipped the Iron Guts, and it did do a couple of wounds. They took that was it. They took 3 hits and then didn't actually take any wounds. So I got off lightly there, which was nice. Into the rest of the strategy phase. So this was when Mike realized he was probably going to end up in combat with the Tzeentch bunker on my next turn. So at this point, he started rolling Gaze the God because he thought, it doesn't matter if I roll stupidity, I'm going to be in combat anyway. It's not going to be a problem. I don't need to take a stupidity test if I'm in combat. So both the level 2 caster and the Sorcerer Lord got +1 initiative, which was pretty underwhelming. The Sorcerer Lord, number 2, got an extra attack though, which is quite nice. They're surprisingly good in combat. They are still like a reasonable weapon skill, a reasonable strength. They've got ensorcel hand weapons, they're AP1. They're not incredible, but then when you layer the buffs that he cast, at this time he got the Demonic Vessel and the Demonic Vigor, so extra strength and toughness, I believe it was, and then also additional attacks. It meant that the Tzeentch bunker was a surprisingly killy little unit that I wasn't too keen to send things into unless it's something like the Bruiser, who is, inherently quite tanky with his high toughness. So into the movement phase, there was a lot of shuffling, basically. The Forsaken charge over here into the flank, into the Gorgia. Again, this was where we were talking about making sure that we had to follow the charge rules as best we could, and we thought you had to move as directly as possible and then wheel and maximize and do all the other stuff. So Gorges get in, the Forsaken get into the Gorgia, only one gets base-to-base combat. It's only got 2 wounds left. Neither of us were particularly worried about that. The Warhounds move up here just to move block, make it so that the Mournfangs can't swing around and charge into the Forsaken, if that's something that ends up needing to happen. The Chosen Knights move again, so this is the second phase of the Chosen Knights repositioning. I think I really managed to avoid the main risk of them with where they were in combat to start with. The Exalted Sorcerer, number 3, the one on horse, moved up just to get in range of the 3-inch casting bubble. Also made sure he had line of sight into units over to the side as much as possible. And the Tzeentch bunker wheeled a little, and the Exalted Sorcerer shuffled as well, just trying to buy as much time for them to do their unleashing of output as possible. And my God, did they have some output. So in the second phase, they do some real shooting, and I don't have the exact here the way that I did for the first turn breakdown because I think I just had my head in my hands. But basically, a combination of the blue fires, the fireballs from the 5 casters in this little chunk here, managed to do 7-8 wounds to the Iron Guts through their armor save and their regen. Also managed to get off a second Vortex of Chaos. Sorry, one was already there. Putting another one down not from the same caster, from a second caster. So 2 casters had a Vortex of Chaos out in the open, just making it very difficult for my for me to walk through. This was pretty not heartbreaking is the wrong word, but it definitely, I was feeling the pressure at this point because I'd taken a huge chunk of damage. Other than that, though, things are going pretty well for me on the map, so I'm not too concerned. Into the combat, the Forsaken absolutely rinse the Gorges, and the Bruiser, again, just absolutely decimates the Warhounds. Again, I think I might have killed it with just impact hits. I don't think it took very much to get through it at all. It was a very quick combat phase, that's for sure. Afterwards, do test to restrain with the Forsaken here. Sorry, I test to restrain with the Bruiser, and I reform there. Mark tests restraint with the Forsaken. He didn't fancy charging into the Mournfang. At this point, he recognized that they have the output to deal with him, and he really, because again, he's in the front rank. He's not the front rank. He's not in the side rank. He wanted to just buy time to stop this unit here from getting into the back lines and crushing his battle line in the center here. Over to my strategy phase, the Vortex finishes off the Iron Guts, which was very upsetting. With it being random directions, I was like, oh, this will be fine. There's no way that this will possibly hit me. I think both hit me, which was grim. But I did manage to dispel both of those, and then I just had a lone Slaughtermaster sort of stood out in the open, not entirely sure what to do with him. I did cast Troll Guts. I managed to get that one off. Quite consistently managed to get Troll Guts off, which was nice. Really made a difference against the onslaught that I was taking from all the casters. But I got that off onto the Bruiser this turn, so the Stonehorn, sorry, having its 4-up armor save and then a 5-up regen as well was really nice. And yeah, then into my charges. I charged the Warhounds because I recognized here that if I just play the sort of footsie dance, Mark's not going to charge me. So I just need to deal with the Warhounds, hopefully pass my test to restrain, deal with the Forsaken next turn, and then try and get into the back flanks here if there's anything left to deal with in the center. I charged with the Bruiser into the bunker. And then I just sort of shuffled up with everything else. The Iron Blaster marched forwards. The reason that I didn't charge is I think the Chosen Knights win that combat. So I just wanted to move block them. I didn't want them getting into the flank of the Bruiser if possible. I wanted to buy as much time as I could. The Iron Guts, they just marched forwards as well, wheeled round and marched forwards, and the Slaughtermaster walked forwards just to see if there was anything that I could get done. As I say, maximum violence here. Combat, everything happened as you'd expect. The Mournfang just wipe out the Warhounds again. Impact hits. The Bull Standard pulled real numbers for me on those impact hits. It absolutely did. And then I do pass my test to reform, so I'm able to face the Forsaken, meaning that either, Mark charges me and I probably deal with him after he's killed a few of them, or I get to charge him. I'm not going to lie, I was quite concerned about the killing blow, because if Mark charges me and rolls killing blow, there is a chance that he just picks up the whole squad. But, you got to do what you can do. It's not like 40k where you can just advance a unit 18 inches, get them out of the firing line. So down here in the center, less of a happy story. The unit champion challenges my Bruiser, as expected. And this is something that I think I'm less and less interested in putting large monsters with characters on them outside of like the obvious dragons. I feel like the Stonehorn's probably good enough just on their own to run and not bothering putting the Bruiser on top of them if I wanted to run some big beasties. So that might be what I explore in the future if I play any more Ogres. And yeah, I win combat, but the unit falls back in good order. So it's not, don't really go anywhere. They do get dangerously close to the edge of the board, which is something that I'm not upset about at all. Moving into the third Chaos Strategy phase, over here, as you see, the Tzeentch Bunker does get some spells off. The only things that Mark is able to cast are those enhancements, being able to cast enhancements in combat. So he does manage to get Demonic Vessel off on a 13. I only roll a 7, which makes it an 11. So I don't get to dispel that one. Doesn't manage to get the Demonic Vigor off, which is nice at least. So Mark goes for Gaze of the Gods again, because you're in combat. Doesn't matter if you roll stupid, which he does become stupid. So his first Sorcerer Lord rolls a 1 on the table, becomes stupid. Gaze of the Gods is obviously an incredible rule, but Mark is playing with almost all casters, and the Gaze of the Gods table is almost all melee buffs. In fact, I think it's entirely melee buffs. So he hasn't planned in rolling on it. So he hasn't gone for any of the Favor of the Gods, the little 5-point upgrade, that extremely common magic item you can take to re-roll once per game. So, of course, he rolls, gets stupidity on one of the Sorcerer Lords, which is, I thought funny, but didn't actually matter for the game. The second Sorcerer Lord gets +1 weapon skill, which is quite nice, actually, because they're going to have to try and chip through this Bruiser before anything else can get into them. And then the Exalted Sorcerer that's in the unit gets +1 attack. Again, not too bad. In this case, it's not ideal, because the Exalted Sorcerer is in this corner here, just under where it says BSB, which means that it's not able to bring its additional attacks to bear. But Potentially nice for later in the game. Movement. Oh, look, there's not very much movement. The Chaos squads, the Forsaken charge into the Mournfang here on the right, and other than that, they are already tied up. The Exalted Sorcerer shuffles just a little bit, as does this Exalted Sorcerer, because they can smell their demise on the horizon. The Chosen Knights as well charge into the Iron Blasters. Don't get much of an initiative bonus, but weirdly against Ogres, you don't need much of an initiative bonus. So they're happy as they are. Moving into the Chaos shooting phase, there's not a lot left for them to shoot because 3 of their big casters are all tied up, which is very nice for me. So the all they really managed to get off is the Vortex of Chaos. The Exalted Sorcerer on horseback can't actually see anything to shoot its spells at, and the Exalted Sorcerer down here at the bottom does just cast the Vortex of Chaos, trying to block off those Iron Guts as much as possible. Into combat. So this is a fairly brutal turn for me, surprisingly. I thought it was going to go a lot better than it actually did. So the where did we start? So Forsaken, they rolled poisoned attacks, and I was like, oh, thank God, I'm saved. Then they rolled 20 attacks, which is quite a lot of attacks. Rolled the hits, got 11 hits, only 2 poisoned auto wounds on top of that. However, Mark then rolled real hot on his wounds. He got 8 wounds, so he barely failed any. Failed 8 saves, which meant that 2 of the Mournfang riders did fall over there, and that's through the Feel No Pain. Sorry, they don't have the regen anymore. But yeah, no, they just got absolutely cleaved apart there. It was fairly horrifying to watch. In return, though, the Mournfang did have the mounts did killed 3 of the Forsaken themselves, and then the Great Weapons got to swing from the Mournfang, and they smushed another 3. So there was only 1 model left, which I'm sure 1 model can't kill many Mournfangs. Definitely not foreshadowing. But that combat stayed as it was there. Over on the left-hand flank, the Chosen Knights absolutely ripped through that Iron Blaster. I thought it might give me a turn. I hadn't run the numbers. I was just like, oh, it's a chunky chariot. It'll probably take 1 turn. No, absolutely not. So Mark started there, killed the Iron Blaster, and then managed to overrun into my Bruiser. Again, because the way we're doing movement, we're making sure that we were contacting and then wheeling and not doing any funny business. He didn't actually get that many models into base to base, which was really nice. So when it came to this combat here, weirdly, he didn't declare any challenges. So I declared a challenge. Funnily enough, Mark refused the challenge with, I think it was the Exalted Sorcerer, just the cheapest character in the unit, basically. So the Chosen Knights got to go first, and they didn't do as much damage as I was worried about. Came in, they only managed to get 2 wounds through because they didn't have too many models in base to base. Only a couple of them got the full effect of their attacks, and then there were a few on the end that got, a smaller number of attacks as well. So 2 wounds into the Bruiser as well. Then the Tzeentch bunker didn't manage to do anything. They just completely whiffed, which I was really pleased about. I was worried that this was going to be the end of my big centerpiece unit, and then I'd be really in the sticky stuff. But then I got to swing back with the Bruiser, and I put all of my attacks into the Chosen Knights because they're the expensive ones. They're the ones that are doing the most threatening damage. They probably wouldn't have been as bad in the next turn of combat, but still, I thought they were worth picking up if possible. But all my attacks and then only managed to kill 2, but I wasn't too upset at that. I did, however, lose combat by a fair whack, and the Bruiser failed its leadership test, but not above its natural leadership, even with a reroll. So fell back in good order, and the Chosen Knights decided to follow up because of where the Iron Guts were, but then the bunker decided to stand still because their plan is to hopefully get some more shooting on the next turn. So as you can see here, Chosen Knights coming behind, Bruiser falls back. Again, looking at this now, I'm not actually sure if they would continue into the flank or if they'd continue up behind. Please do let me know in the comments. I would like some clarity on that one. I think we did it right, but if I'm wrong, please do let us know. So, Ogre strategy phase 4. This is where the game starts to get quite quick. Past the regen on the Slaughtermaster from his Cauldron, doing really well with it. Not even, you can't re-roll with the BSB, so I haven't been doing that wrong. It's just I've been naturally rolling 8s and under, which is nice. I'm sure the next time I do it, it'll not go as well for me. I do also manage to dispel the Vortex of Chaos down here on the left flank from the Iron Guts, which was nice because that was causing me some concern. Before I did, it did scatter, but in a meaningless way. It didn't affect the course of the game. So then charges. The Slaughtermaster charges into the flank of the Chosen Knights, and the Iron Guts just march forwards, taking the movement penalty of moving through the difficult terrain there. Just really want to threaten that Tzeentch bunker. That's the plan. Combat up on the top, Forsaken rolls Killing Blow and manages to roll a single 6 to wound, which just splat one of the Mournfang, which was fairly upsetting, actually. They were a very expensive unit for a single model to kill an entire 4 wound cavalry. But yes, then the last model does smush it. Over on the flank here, the Chosen Knights unfortunately do get to go first, and they do 3 wounds through the bruiser, which is, again, not where I want to be. I was hoping to try and deal with them before anything else happened, but Mark did remind me that he got the initiative bonus because he followed up. Whereas in my head, I was like, oh, great, I'm just going to charge them and deal with them beforehand. However, after that point, I managed to cast the illusion spell, the spectral doppelganger, and I got 10 auto hits. Beautiful. 10 auto hits. It was winning on 4s. I think, no, winning on 3. Sorry, I got 7 wounds through. Mark failed 4 of them. Passed one of the ward saves from his chaos armor, but then I finished off the last model with the normal attacks with the biting blade. So absolute beefcake of a Slaughtermaster coming through for me when I really needed it the most. Chosen Knights going down, really good. Bruiser being left on 2 wounds, a little more concerning. So obviously overran here with the Mournfang, trying to get closer, make sure that I can do something on my turn when I am dealing with the last bits of the Chaos Army. Coming into Mark's turn number 4, this is sort of the real make or break turn, I think. So he managed to get both buffs off into the Warrior Brick, which is really nice. Obviously, this is going to be a combat focus game for the rest of it. So manages to buff them to the 9s, which is lovely. And then shuffles sideways. I wasn't expecting to charge me, but I'm not really sure what that's achieved, other than being a little bit further away from the Mournfang. It was a couple of weeks since we played this game, so it's entirely possible that we measured it out and worked out that the Mournfang wouldn't be able to make the charge if he shuffled, which is probably the case, but looking at it, it does look a little odd on here. Then we go into the shooting phase, and oh god, they do indeed light up the bruiser. This was horrifying. I was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'm T6, you winning me on 6s. No. So the bunker started off with a Sorcerer Lord, got off blue fire, 6 hits, no wounds. Great start. Very pleased about this. The Sorcerer Lord 2 got off blue fire, 9 hits, 2 wounds, 1 of which was unsaved. Ooh, okay, so I'm down to 2 wounds remaining. Not great. Then cast a fireball only on 9. I failed to dispel it, so we're both rolling. He rolled a 3, I rolled a 5, which is not ideal. 9 hits, only a single wound, failed the save, so chunk down. And then the Exalted Sorcerer number 1 manages to cast blue fire, deals that last point of damage, and just absolutely decimates me. Picks up that bruiser. It was due a death. It tanked a lot of damage, but it was quite that was the point where I was like, oh god, I hope I'm gonna be all right here. I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it. So bruiser does die there. There's not really anything else that happens. I think there's like a couple of fireballs that are thrown out by the Exalted Sorcerer that are dispelled, but all the meaningful damage goes into the bruiser there. Not another wound is done that isn't saved. Into my turn, strategy turn 5. Pass the leadership test again. Fantastic. Failed to cast the Troll Guts, unfortunately. But you know what? Them's the breaks. Hopefully, I'm just going to pick them up on my turn anyway. So I make a double charge here. The Slaughtermaster goes in to the flank. The Iron Guts go into the front. Impact hits between them do kill a couple of models, which is really nice. And that is the last slide here, because what happens is I go into the flank. The Slaughtermaster again gets the Spectral Doppelganger off. Only gets 6 hits this time, but cleaves up 3 of the warriors. He manages to kill another 1 with his attacks. So I think including his impact hits, he's killed 5 warriors already. The Iron Gut, I did have to challenge with the well, I did challenge with the Iron Gut Champion. It was accepted by one of the Sorcerer Lords, just didn't have anyone else to accept it. Didn't want to send a model to the back when he, was fighting for his life. I didn't want the Slaughtermaster to be prevented from cleaving through the unit, basically. But yeah, between them killed 2/3 of the unit, and then they fled off the board. And at that point, Mark said, all right, let me just quickly roll some spells. Rolled his spells to see if he could pick up the Mournfang and went, no, I can't. Okay, that's fine. And that was the end of the game. So that was great. A lot of fun. Really good proof of concept, I think. The fact that I went first and rolled quite well in the spells meant that I felt a lot better about my defenses into the barrage of spells that Mark was sending my way, because he was doing a lot of damage. I think we both think that there's some tuning to be done with the Warriors list, and I might give a version of it a go in the future. We did a little bit of brainstorming after the game, and we decided 2 Sorcerer Lords is fine, but you could put a Demon Prince in. I quite liked the concept of having a Demon Prince flying around with just some defensive boost to level 4 caster. I think I might have gone 2 level 4s and a Demon Prince, and that was sort of the full casting brick, and you weren't bothered about the level 2 casters because they are fine. They're not super exciting. In this case, you'd have 2 casting at +6 and 1 casting at +5 if you're in range, which is more than enough, and you can get all the spells that you need. But yeah, fantastic game. As I say, these will be typically coming out every other Wednesday. They'll be coming out fortnightly on weeks interspersed with the Close Order podcast. I am planning to get one out next week alongside another episode of Close Order, but after that, it will go into an every other week. And yeah, thanks for watching.